Hi, welcome back to Need More Coffee, Please with Cisco and Melissa.
I'm Cisco.
I'm Melissa. And today we are going to continue with the When Church Hurts Now a series. So last week we talked about kind of our story, our history of church and ministry. And we kind of, we got a lot of messages and comments and stuff from people um, who have been through, similar situations. And we just really felt like kind of continuing the conversation would be a good thing because there was a lot that we actually wanted, like a lot more that we wanted to say.
Mm.
And, afterwards we were like, oh, dang, we should have said that or should have talked about this. And, we were already had an hour long episode. So,
Yeah, we didn't want to kill you guys.
yeah. So we thought, okay, we'll just continue, do another episode of it. So yeah, like I said, we're going to talk just a little more about kind of the things that we saw, once we stepped away from church and ministry, um, you know, the things that we had, seen kind of leading up to us stepping away. And then, once you're outside of it, the stuff that the Lord like really showed us, being
Mm.
on the on the outside of it. And we don't want this to be like church bashing at all.
Mm.
That is definitely not our heart or our intent. But there are issues, and I think it's really important to talk about them. There's a lot of gaslighting in the church and in ministry, unfortunately, to where you think you are crazy or it's just you and it's, just your problem. And that's not true. Like, if you feel in your spirit and in your heart that something is wrong, it's because there's something wrong.
Mm.
And, you know, so it's good to know that you're not alone, but also that there are real issues. And if we don't talk about them, they're not going to change, So yeah, so this is, this episode is definitely for the people who are in the season of walking through church hurt or have walked through it, and or maybe you will, at some point. But um you know those of you who have been through it and know what we're talking about, like, this is for you. So
Yeah, for sure. And like Melissa said, we're not here to bash any particular church or ministry or movement or anything like that. But we have been able to step outside and see some issues from the outside looking in, and sometimes that's what it takes. That's what it takes. You going into the outside. If you're in a relationship that you think may be going well, but you have good friends who know you or know the person you're with, and they can see some issues. They can see that it may be toxic or detrimental to yourself or to that other person, or you're just not being yourself, or you're being abused or neglected in some way. It's easier for them to see, and sometimes you don't see it or you don't want to see it because you're in it, because you really like this person,
mhm,
because you feel secure in a relationship, just any relationship, and you feel better about yourself just being in that, and it's really difficult to see when you're in it, and sometimes you do have to take a step back, or you know put yourself in somebody else's shoes and really step on the outside and look inside and see exactly what's going on. We did do that, and then I think the Lord you really used that to open up our eyes to see certain things, and we're not acting as if we're some sort of church authority, or
gurus.
or gurus, or we're like we know it all, because that's far from the case.
Mhm.
um but we have been going to church pretty much all our lives and in ministry for a long period of time, and we have seen some things, we have experienced some things, and again, when we were in a lot of those things, we didn't see it. Like
Yeah.
maybe we thought some of those things, well, that's kind of messed up, or I don't like the
That
way,
hurt. That was
yeah,
hurtful.
yeah, I don't like the way that was handled.
Mhm.
But we didn't really see how bad and how toxic it really was at the
Mhm.
time, because we were just in it. We were just like, oh well, that's just the way it goes. That's
Yeah.
just the way he or she is, or whatever, or
Nothing I
they're,
can do about it.
yeah, they're pastors, they're ministers. We
Mhm.
can't, I don't want to speak against the Lord's anointed. Um, and so we kind of get caught up into that, and we just want to help and encourage those who are going through that, have gone through that, may are gonna go through that
Mhm.
in the future, because unfortunately, I think a lot of us, if you're in church long enough, you're gonna go through something like that.
Yeah,
That's just that's
most
just
likely.
that's just the bottom line, because the church is full of people. It's run by people,
Mhm.
and as well meaning as they may be, or not be, or maybe they're not well meaning at
Mhm.
all, and they hurt you. That it shouldn't take away from the relationship that you have with the Lord. The relationship that you have with the Lord is personal. It's between you and Him. And yes, the church is a big part of that. But if you get hurt or burned by the church, that shouldn't ruin or hinder your relationship with the Lord. And a lot of times it does,
Yeah. And,
unfortunately.
and just so you know, like God does not he is not okay with that. Like he is not okay with you being treated or abused or gaslit all the time. Like that is not something that he is just sitting back like, "Oh well." Um, and I think that's important for you to know because when I know for us, like, yeah, you think you can't speak up or you can't confront situations because they're the pastor or they're the leader, and um that should never be the case. Like accountability has lacked so much in so many churches. That was a huge issue from the ministry that we were a part of for many years. Like there was really
Hmm.
no accountability to the pastor, or for the pastor in the leadership, and that's just created so many issues. So, if you're somewhere where you feel like you can't speak up, or if you do speak up, you're going to get cut.
Hmm.
It's a pretty good sign that it's a toxic situation and an abusive situation ultimately, and probably one should really consider leaving. But um, yeah, but all that to say, like God is not okay with these things just as much as we aren't, and or seeing someone we love go through them.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
it's not okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And those pastors, those leaders are gonna be, they're held to a higher account,
Hmm.
and it's unfortunate that some of them do put you in those situations, or get into those situations themselves. And just like so many pastors that we've seen, especially if they're in the Moses model, if they're the top dog and they
Hmm.
don't really have a whole lot of accountability, or they're surrounded by yes men, they're the ones that fall into sin.
No.
They're the ones that get in trouble with finances, or with adultery, or with
Hmm.
different things like that, because they feel like they're above everybody else, or there's nobody who's really calling them out.
Hmm.
And they think they're the Lord's anointed, so they can do whatever they want.
And I think a lot of times they even start, that model is attractive to them because they think that they can't trust anyone but themselves. Like
Right. Mm.
like they can only trust themselves to make these decisions, and it really sets them up to fall into these
Mm-hmm.
sins or whatever, traps because
They're control freaks in a
yeah.
way. They really
Yeah.
just want to control everything.
Mhm.
They want their hands on everything. They want to make all the decisions,
Yeah.
and they don't want people to question.
And they might think it's for a good reason. Like, I know myself, I think, they think that they're a strong,
Hmm.
person who seeks the Lord, but, accountability it's not just for everyone else. Like, it's for,
Hmm.
it's for our own protection. Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like how many marriages and families and just ministries have been ruined, and what a terrible name they put on the church and on God because of stuff that they did, because
Mhm.
they did not want to be held accountable. They thought they
Yeah.
were above that. And what a terrible witness they've been, and how many people were burned and were hurt because of that, like
Mhm.
countless, and people from the outside looking in and people inside the church, they've both been equally just really hurt, and really turned off to the gospel and
Mhm.
to the Lord because of what they've done, unfortunately. And a lot of some of them might go in, like you said, like go in and they see the Moses model attractive because that's, oh, I want to be the top dog, I want to be the boss and call in all the shots. And they can't be a CEO of companies. So I'm just going to be a pastor of a church.
Yeah.
It's almost the same thing. But some of them go in with really good
Mhm.
intentions, and they
Absolutely.
and they might start off in a small church or in a home group in a really small setting, and they're doing everything right. Everything's going really well, and as things progress and get bigger and bigger, things start to change. And they might have all the good intentions, but they get distracted, with things. All of a sudden, you got a building. All of a sudden, you got
Mhm.
all this staff. All of a sudden, you got all these ministries. You got these things to worry about, these bills to pay. And even though that should not be the pastor's job, and maybe it isn't, because he has accountants and administrators who are taking care of that and taking over that. In the back of his
Yeah,
mind,
it's always gonna be on his
it's,
mind.
it's always going to be
Mhm.
on his mind, and he's always going to see people come in, see empty chairs when he's out preaching,
Mhm.
wondering how much money is coming in, how much is going out, and that's going to affect how he teaches, how he interacts with people, who he
Sure.
interacts with, you know. I think that's really, as good of intentions as you have, I think that's really gonna affect you. And just like a lot of, I think a lot of a lot of politicians who end up being corrupt,
Mhm.
they might go in with really good intentions. They legit want to help people. They want the government to be good. They want
Mhm.
to root out corruption. They only want to put good people in place. And then after a while, they start seeing like, oh, these guys are doing this. This guy's doing, insider trading or trading stocks, or he's getting some money from this lobbyist or that company, and then all of a sudden, you start doing the same thing because it's like, well, if they're doing it, if they're getting away with it, then
Mhm.
why am I the only schmuck who's not getting rich off of this?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of pastors feed off of that Moses model, and they feed off of other pastors as well, and they see other pastors get rich or having this status, or having these things, and then all of a sudden, they really want that too, and
Yeah.
that's just human nature.
Yeah.
It's not that they're bad guys necessarily. I mean, who knows if any one of us we could fall into the same trap. I'm not saying we're above it or where we would
I mean, I think
never.
that's the thing, like, no one's above it,
Right.
Everyone has a price they're willing to pay, and Satan knows that, like,
Mhm.
he's not stupid, and, it's just dangerous. It's dangerous for us to not have accountability for that reason
Mhm.
because he knows, and he's gonna confront you with it at some point. And if you're just answering to yourself and you've gotten away with, you know, this or that, like, it's it's gonna be a temptation that you can't say no to.
Mhm.
And you can I think a lot of times justify it away of like, oh well, I got this, I can, like, this is okay because it's me, like I trust myself, I'm
Mhm.
good, like I'm not gonna you know sleep with this person, for 10 years. It's just this once, and then before you know it, it is 10 years. And yeah, so
Yeah, it's really sad that people, pastors, you know, have legit gone through relationships, extramarital relationships for that long,
mhm,
and they're
yeah,
still married, and they're teaching,
mhm,
and they're praying and all
mhm,
this stuff, and yet this is going on in the background.
mhm,
Um, I just don't understand
yeah,
how you can live like that.
mhm,
It just doesn't make sense. But it happened. It's
mhm,
happened,
yeah,
and it will happen again. Unfortunately,
mhm.
it's just not a one time thing. And
And I think along with that, like we talked about last week, wolves in sheep's clothing that are in the church. And a lot of times that is the leadership and or the pastor
Mhm,
themselves. Like, I shared a little bit about, my the guy my mom was married to for a short period of time, after my dad passed away. And, he was a deacon in the church, like
mhm,
a leader in the church. And the pastor completely like, yeah, you should, like encourage that relationship. And he was a warlock, like straight up high ranking witch in the church. And, in that same church, there was a 33rd degree Mason who was basically the assistant pastor and like leader of, like, head of the board or something. Like, just people that have no business being in the
mhm,
positions they were in. And I mean, and ultimately like evil, like that is evil in the church. And
mhm,
Satan's not, again, he's not stupid. And why wouldn't he be putting, people that want to take down the church in
mhm.
the church and getting them in roles that they can, like, just destroy other people,
Right.
and the church in general.
Mhm.
Of course he's going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I know those bad acts and bad intentions, um, and just bad people. It's easy to cloak themselves in religious
Mhm.
talk. Oh well, you know, the Lord told me to do this, or the Lord told me to do that, or He told me to tell you to do X, Y, and Z. And you know, it's easy. Like Satan knows that language. He knows that
Mhm.
Christianese. And it's easy for him to pass that on, to a wolf, to someone who does have bad intentions, because then they can do these things, um, and excuse it away as God told me to God told me to do it, or this is what the Lord wants to do, in and through this. And so, it's easy for us to be deceived, and even for pastors to be deceived, because these guys come as angels of lights,
Yep.
just like Satan comes, and they look they look good, they say all the right things, they do all the right things,
Mhm.
but behind the scenes, they're not. They're really out to rob, kill, and destroy.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that those people have been let in the church. And I think there's just been a lack of discernment in a lot of the church leadership and
Mhm.
letting these people in, and they're there for themselves, or for their own glory, or for their own fame, for their own riches, and a lot of pastors just take them at their word, instead of really just asking the Lord if this person is legit, if he's coming in for the right reasons or not. And it's a shame that that's happened. I think
Mhm.
we've been victims of some of that as well, of some of these people, and just it's important for us to pray for the church leadership to not allow
Yep.
these people in, and to not allow these people in the upper levels of the church, and so they can come in and wreak havoc,
Mhm.
or try to do a church split, or just whatever the case may be. And there's a lot of that stuff going
Yeah.
on. you know
Yep. Yeah. And I think in that same note, like, you know, being a part of the ministry and the church that we were in for, all those years, like one of the things that they did really, really well was teach the Bible. What's the word?
Verse by verse,
Yeah, verse by verse and
expository.
expository. That's the word that's what I'm
Mm-mm.
going for. Um, yeah, like they taught the word really, really well. And you know, so you would hear a lot of teachings about the Holy Spirit and
Mhm.
kind of, the power that we have through him, and even if you look at Jesus's entire, ministry and the time that he was here on earth and what he was doing with his disciples and training his disciples to do was, you know, deliverance,
Healing the
healing the
sick.
sick, like actively doing miracles.
Mhm.
Um, and he prayed a lot, like, that was one of the things we were talking about in our small group the other night was just how much he prayed. And, he's God himself, but he did that for a reason, to teach us, to show us like that's how we should be, living our lives
Mhm.
in prayer. And you just you don't see those things being done in churches, or very, very little of it. I think with a lot of like deliverance ministries, have gotten, a bad name because it's done in a very like showy way or just
Mhm.
like freaky. Um, and unfortunately that has, kind of given it a bad rap. But when it's done like right, it's not that way, first of all. And it shouldn't be done that way. Um, but there just lacks so much power in the church. And when you are raised and taught those things of what the church should be doing, but then you're not seeing that acted out or done, it is really like, I don't know, like something's off and wrong, and
Mhm.
that was like a big thing for me, I think. Like, having grown up in a house where I did see a lot of, unfortunately, demonic activity, like I knew the spiritual world was real,
Mhm.
very real. And I learned how to kind of like fight it at a really young age. Like I would literally sit in my bed and just say Jesus's name over and over to make the demon in my room go away. Like, um, I, that just was a reality of my childhood. And so I knew like the spiritual world is real. And you hear like we don't war against flesh and blood. We,
Mhm.
war against principalities, and that is true and that is real. And we are not like engaged in that, you know, mindset and spiritual world at all as a church in America. Other countries I mean, I haven't been to them, but I've heard, especially like a lot of those like Caribbean
Mhm.
countries, like it's a very real thing that they're aware of.
Mhm.
And deliverance ministries are huge over there for a reason. And it's just like here in America, it's not like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, for sure.
barely even mentioned.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. In a lot of these countries, there is witchcraft pretty much
Mm-hmm.
out in the
Yep.
open. Voodoo, Santeria, which is like in like the Caribbean, Cuba. It's like a mix
Mm-hmm.
of like voodoo and Catholicism, so they use some of the Catholic saints, but they use voodoo gods as well. So some of that stuff is out there. It's open. It's openly practiced, and with that does come demonic and satanic activity, and people are possessed, and people are oppressed, and there are ministries that help with deliverance of that,
Mhm.
help them people get freed from that possession or for that from that oppression, and then that is not as widely practiced here, at least out in the open. I think there are
I
people who
don't know. I think
practice
it's
it.
getting more,
It's getting
more and
more.
more.
Yeah, you see a lot more celebrities,
Hmm.
you know and
Musicians.
musicians and actors and stuff talking about those kind of things, and a lot of it here is hidden in, not that I practice voodoo or not that I pray to these random gods or saints, but in manifestation, in positive thinking,
Meditating, yoga.
meditating, yoga,
Hmm.
ayahuasca,
Hmm.
all these other different things, and it's really, I feel like it's pretty much the same thing, just under a different name.
Yeah, it's
You know.
glamorized here. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of musicians will joke about being like in, a lot of imagery and stuff in their shows that are
Mm,
very witchy,
mhm.
and satanic, really. And it's like, oh, well, it's art, like
Like
it's just,
Taylor Swift.
yeah. Shh. Um, but really, like it's just kind of like tongue in cheek and labeled
Mhm.
art here, and it's like, is it though? Like, it's like
Mhm.
are they
Mhm.
just being silly gooses? I don't know. Don't
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think
I
so.
think I think they're serious, and it's
Hmm.
becoming a bigger and bigger thing,
Yeah.
and more
More
artists are doing
and
it.
it's honestly trendy.
It's really trendy, and a lot of these people, yes, they're doing it for the shock value,
Hmm.
and they're doing it to gain followers and to gain listeners, but a lot of these people are like, that's the thing, is maybe they start doing off jokingly and for the shock value, and just to gain more popularity, but you keep messing with that stuff, and eventually it's gonna be for real,
Yeah.
like Satan isn't gonna be like, oh, ha ha ha, that's funny,
Hmm.
I'll let you do X, Y, and Z, and I'll leave you alone, I won't do anything with you. But you start messing with that stuff pretty soon, you know uh you're in it,
Yeah, and
whether.
you don't know like what you're
Mhm.
messing with. You really don't. Like, you could be letting stuff in that, and it might be a joke to you, but it's not to him.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think that happens uh more like more often than we know.
Yeah.
And I think, and all that to say, like, I think a lot of Christians, or Christians who've gone through, um what's that called, like when they when you oh, have kind of come out of church, and you're questioning a lot of things,
Deconstruction.
deconstructing, yes,
Yeah.
deconstructing their faith. um that's a big thing now. And um and not necessarily always a bad thing. I know, you know some people look at it as bad, but it's not always a bad thing. um because I feel like we kind of went through that in a sense.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, it can, a lot of times, they just completely fall away. And I think a lot of them get very, or a lot of people that have gone through that are very enticed by that world, that whole
Sure.
new age witchcraft world, because, like us, like, you're taught one thing about the power of the Holy Spirit, and like this close relationship that you can have with God, and like how the church should be interacting with each other, in with the gifts of the Holy Spirit. But then not seeing that ever
Right.
played out is like very
Mhm.
hard to like reconcile in your mind of, why you're not seeing that, and you've been taught that it's true and you believe that it's true. You like maybe even had experiences with the spiritual world, but like the church is so neutered and
Mhm.
powerless essentially, really, and not, actively engaging in these things that can look really, really enticing.
Yeah.
You hear these influencers and celebrities and stuff who talk about their experiences on ayahuasca, and or like, oh, when I'm meditating and talking to my spirit guide, and and you're like that sounds really cool, and
Mhm. Mhm.
something in you knows that that's like kind of how, like in a way, like sounds very Christian, like you're connecting with, your higher self, and like being guided, in your life, but it's a counterfeit. It is a
Right.
full on counterfeit of what we are supposed to be experiencing as Christians, and how we're supposed to be living, and how we're supposed to be engaging with each other and the world, and we're not doing it. And that, like it's kind of crushing, like when you realize that, and now being in a church that is very active in those things and in the gifts of the Holy Spirit, like it's a whole different ball game.
Mhm.
And yeah, like it is so life-giving and so encouraging and edifying to see those things every Sunday morning,
Mhm.
and you're like, everything within you is like, yes, and if every church, like, think of all the churches that are, you know, even in our city of Fort Worth, like,
Right.
there's so many churches. And if all of them were doing that, like, we would we would live in a completely different country. We would
Yeah.
live in a completely different world. Like,
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't, like in our experience in the churches that we went to, they wrote verse by verse, Genesis through Revelation. So inevitably you're gonna come up to different passages about the Holy Spirit, about the power of the Holy Spirit, him coming upon the disciples in the upper room, the healings, the miracles, and him moving. And so the passage does talk about that, but and he talks about the power. They've done a good job of talking about the power of the Holy Spirit. They don't brush it aside. They don't skip
Yeah.
over it. you know but then during worship, if somebody, first of all, we were all, a lot of times we were sitting down during worship,
Yeah.
which, whatever. But if somebody stood up during worship while everybody sit down and put their hands up because they were worshiping, and the spirit was really coming upon them and they were feeling it, the ushers would literally come by and ask them to sit down
Mhm.
because they were bringing attention to themselves. So it's like, wait a second, I thought you just talked about the Holy Spirit
Mhm.
and the power, and how he can come upon you and make you worship, and then you're making people sit down
Yeah.
because you don't want them to be a distraction, or you don't want that to be all about themselves. So, you they're preaching one thing and then
Mhm.
another thing is happening in practice. And I get, okay, you don't want it to be about them, or you don't want these people to be a distraction, but at the same time, like, let these people worship. They really want to, and I don't see how one person in a crowd of 1,000 people is going to be like a huge distraction, to other people
Mhm.
worshiping,
And if
so.
people are worshiping, like they're not paying attention to the person who
Right.
stood up
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
raised their
Yeah.
hands.
For
Like,
sure.
like, I mean, like I don't even hardly open my eyes
Right.
in
Yeah.
worship anymore. It's like I'm somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'm in the
I'm
throne
in
room.
my
I'm
own
not.
world.
Yeah.
I'm not paying attention to anybody. So, it's just interesting that they
Hmm.
they teach one thing and another thing
Yeah.
happens in practice. And it's a shame, because I really think there's a lot of power in that. There's, like where we're at now, there's just, so many gifts
Yeah.
happening, so many things happening. And at first it was a little bit like, whoa, what is
Whoa. But
what
it
is
was, I
going
mean,
on
but at the
here?
same time, like it wasn't like we've been to charismatic churches where it's like freaky, or like
Mm,
weird, and you're like, okay, this is. this
Mm.
is getting weird. That, you know,
That is
it's
not it.
not, no.
Yeah.
You're just like, yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's very
It was
weird.
definitely
Yeah.
foreign to us
Oh,
because we
totally.
grew up in,
Hmm.
it was a lot more sterile, like during worship and stuff like that. It was, pretty much everybody did the same thing. Everybody sat up, stood up, or sat down, and it was pretty just, the worship was
Hmm.
good and all that,
Hmm.
but it wasn't. It's not the same as it
Yeah.
is now.
Yeah. Like here, yeah, there were like you're moved. Like I cry every Sunday
Yeah.
in
So do
worship.
I.
Like,
Full disclosure.
like I can't. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't make it through.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
No,
worship
it's tough.
session there without bawling my eyes out. Because it's just, yeah, and not for any reason, like not because it's like, whoa, the band is so amazing. I mean, they're really good, but it's not like it's not even about that. It's because
Mm,
everyone is so engaged and just worshiping, and you literally feel like you are in the throne
mhm.
room of heaven.
Yeah, no, it's
Like
pretty incredible.
it's just, yeah, it's amazing. But anyway, so where were we?
um, just the
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are searching for that, just real, and not just like searching for an experience, because I know that can be a thing, and that's not what I'm trying to say is to like, go after an
mm,
experience or anything, but like, but real, like authentic, like,
right.
and like seeing the Holy Spirit actively move. And that, and I think that's one thing, like we honestly, when we were kind of seeing this stuff, like, um, and and realizing like what was lacking, I honestly didn't have a lot of hope that we would ever find
Mm,
it in a
mhm.
church. Like
Yep.
I wanted it so bad, but it was like I don't even know how to go about like practicing that in my own life, because I've never seen it done. And
Yeah. No, it was yeah, down here in Texas in the Bible Belt, church is very much a culture,
oh yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And not everybody goes to church here. I'm not trying to say that because that's definitely not true, but a lot of people
But a
do
lot of
go to
people do.
a lot of people do go to church here.
A lot.
And I guess it's always been that way here in the
Hmm.
South. Um, and
And there's a million churches.
there's a million
So
churches.
many.
Yeah, a million big churches.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Huge.
big churches out here. And I don't, I just don't. I have a hard time believing. Maybe I'm a little bit too skeptical that all those churches, all those, especially the big ones, are really doing what the Lord called them to do.
Hmm.
It's really once you get that size, like we said, it's really
Yeah.
difficult to do that because there's a lot of distractions and
A lot
possibly
of
a lot
times
of
you're more worried about keeping the lights on than you are
mm,
about spreading the gospel.
and possibly a lot of wolves
Hmm.
coming in
Yeah. Oh yeah.
too, and they can be coming into the leadership, they can be
Hmm.
coming into the congregation and causing a ruckus and stirring
Hmm.
up trouble. And, you know, when you got 1,000 people coming into your church, like, what are the chances that every single one of them is there for all the right reasons and really wants to have a relationship with the Lord? And, how many of them are just there maybe to see what's going on, maybe to cause some division, maybe they
Hmm.
legit are wolves. Like, you just never know. So, down here, there's so many of those big mega churches, and that's really what those are the ones that really stand out. You don't
Hmm.
really see the little guys
Yeah.
kind of hiding in neighborhoods or hiding in the background. So it's easy to see those big ones and get discouraged, like, oh man, this place is just
Hmm.
full of these.
And that's what we thought. Like,
Mhm.
we were going to one when we, after a few years moving out here, we, wanted to start going back to church. And Yeah, so, and at first it was fine because, at that point we just wanted to kind of disappear into the crowd
Mm,
and not,
mm,
not get involved. We're just trying to get our feet wet, and it was fine at first. And then after a couple weeks it was like,
and I was like, yeah,
okay, like we're not going to be able to grow here at all. Just a lack of teaching the word, really. I mean, it's more like, a lot of self-help like type sermons,
motivational.
motivational, yeah, like TED Talk kind of
Yeah, yeah.
um sermons, and that's fine. Like there's a place for that, I think, for people, I guess,
I
like,
don't know if that time and place is Sunday morning at
yeah,
church,
I
but
know.
you know.
Yeah. And but that's most of those big mega churches, like that's how they get people coming back.
Mm,
You don't want to touch on the sensitive subjects or the ones that might, upset people or make
mm,
them not come back, because you've got bills to pay and you've got a
mm,
staff to pay, and have this big massive building, and that becomes the concern, and it's just so backwards,
yeah,
really,
yeah. Joel Osteen ain't preaching fire and brimstone. You know,
Yeah, no.
he's not teaching the tough
Mm,
passages about conviction of sin or anything like that.
mhm,
He's all about living your best life now. So that's just what happens is they get trapped into that. Maybe they were teaching that at the
yeah,
beginning, but
maybe.
then after a while,
Mhm,
it's not the most appetizing or enticing thing to
mhm,
preach on. Nobody really, oh, I can't wait to hear about this, that, and the other. Like nobody goes into that. But if you are preaching motivational speeches and self-help, it's like
mhm,
people kind of tend towards that, and
yeah,
they might lean towards that. They might be excited about hearing about that kind of stuff.
mhm.
So there's a reason why that church and so many other churches
And
who
a lot of
preach that
people, sorry, go ahead.
are so big. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
But I think a lot of people even don't even know the
Sure.
difference,
Yeah,
like
that's
maybe
true.
you've never even really heard like the Bible taught. I think that's a lot of that out here too. They've never experienced, a church that goes through the Bible, the entire Bible, and so they don't know any different. And
Hmm.
that's um so if anyone like that is listening to this, they're probably wondering what the heck we're talking about.
Mm.
Um, but obviously there's people who, like us, did grow up or have been, in a church that does teach through that, and it's a big difference. And I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I mean, we just want to encourage those who
Hmm.
might be going through or have gone through church hurt themselves, and they might be in a place spiritually or geographically that there just doesn't seem to be anything that would be any church or anything like that that would be the right fit for them, or it might be difficult depending on where you're at, um to find something. And it's tough. Like we get it, we understand. And sometimes you may have to travel
Hmm.
longer than that you normally would. Like the one mega church that we were going to was like 10 minutes from my house. It was really close in our community, so to speak. And the church we go to now is like 25 minutes away. So it's a
Hmm.
it's a little bit different. It's not like we're driving an hour, and I know some people do every Sunday. And you know, sometimes in order to find a really good church, like that's just
What
what
you
you
have
have
to
to
do.
do.
Hmm.
I think it's worth it
Hmm.
in the end. Where some of you may not be in a place economically where you may be able to, or financially where you may be able to spend all that gas doing that. But I think the Lord will bless and reward you for finding something that's good and having a better relationship with him because of that.
And I think also, like, you know, if you look at Acts, like all these churches were in homes,
Mm,
and obviously, like, not saying that that's the only way to do it, but some of our most like treasured times and memories of, even being like when we were in the church plant and stuff like that, like the best times were when we were in the park
mm,
just praying, and it was so simple,
mhm.
but it was like the community aspect of that was so beautiful, and just the simplicity of it, really, and it doesn't have to be like a structured Sunday morning. Like if you just,
Mhm.
have a few like-minded people that, maybe are in the same place as you, or, maybe even not that. Maybe they're, just learning about the Lord. Like if you don't have a church, like grab those people and just start something,
Mhm.
like just pray together, pray over each other. It doesn't have to be like, I mean, and what I'm trying to say is sometimes it's better if it's not,
Right.
and like community and fellowship is extremely important. We were out of it for quite a while.
Mhm.
I mean, a few years, and that was something we really, at first, we didn't miss it, to be honest. Um, or at
Right.
least
No, that's
yeah.
true. That's
I
true.
mean, we've always been very, yeah, hospitable. We've always just had like a lot of people in our home, um, just facilitating a lot of that
Mm.
kind of stuff, dinners and Bible studies and prayer meetings and stuff like that. Like that was our lives for many, many years, and we loved it. Like we loved that. And then we went to not doing that at all, and for many years. And at first, it was kind of nice, like I will say, but I did quickly start to miss it, and
Mhm.
I think, but then it's like you're in, how do you even create that? Like, how do you start that? And um thankfully we're back in that now, but that it took some time, and I think we went pretty slow with it because it is hard after you've been hurt and you've lost everyone that you um that you were really close with at one time. It can be a little scary to be vulnerable and open yourself up
Yeah, for
again to
sure.
that, and know that that is a possibility that you might you know lose people you love, and that hurts and it's hard. Um, but it's really, really important. And like now that we're back in it and that we have, we're starting to get like friends and people that are pouring into our lives like all the time. It's just, and especially here, like at the church that we're at, like everyone is just so, I don't know, they're just like so on your team, and it's
Yeah, yeah.
crazy. Like no competition, no weird like, and not saying that everyone's like I'm sure they're, you know, everyone's human. So, but just what we've experienced so far is just like so much support and
Mhm.
love, and it's just crazy. And and now that we have that again, it's like, man, I really, really miss that.
Yeah.
And it's important to have as a Christian, when you're really trying to figure out, praying for answers or seeking the Lord about something, like many times he speaks through other people to you. And if you don't have anyone, in your life to speak to you, it's really
Right.
hard
Yeah.
sometimes to, you know, hear that and or get those answers. And not that he can't speak to you individually, he does, but it's just it's good to have a body and
Mhm.
people. So all that to say, like, if you are in a place where you can't find a church or you don't, like, you're not really like up for going and shopping for a church or whatever, um, just grab a few, some people, grab a couple people.
Mm. Even people in your own family,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
Starting something at home, and who knows what the Lord
Yeah.
can do in and through that. Yeah, we were kind of in the wilderness for a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but thankfully the Lord brought us back, and we know we're not a one-off. We're not the only ones out there who experience what
Mm-hmm.
we have. Who've gone through the wilderness, who've gone through church hurt, and just didn't know if there was any hope, if there was anything out there. I know there's many of you who have and who are going through that right now. And there's hope. Like God's gonna work. He's gonna lead you to the right place, or He's
Mm-hmm.
gonna lead you to do something yourself as well. And we just want to share that with you guys. Like, there's no, you know, uh, it doesn't mean that that it's the end.
Yeah.
That's it.
If anything, I feel like it's the beginning, like he has brought you through these things and shown you like the issues that you're seeing for a reason and a
Mm.
purpose. Like he wants to do something new, he's not okay with the state of the church in America. Like I can a
Right.
1000% like say that, there's so much that is coming to light in the church, so much is being exposed, that's been hidden for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And he is not okay with that. He hasn't been okay with that. He's bringing it to light for a reason. And we are living in that time, just as Esther, like you were born for such a time
Mm.
as this, like, and he has brought you through that church hurt and shown you these things for a reason, and I fully believe wants to do something completely new
Mm-hmm.
in the church and in this country. And we get to be a part of that, like those of us who have seen it and who have walked through it and come out the other side, still having a relationship with the Lord, still, believing that He loves the church and wants to use the church. Like, that's exactly what He wants to do. And you get to be a part of that. So, you know, I think another thing that is really important that I will add really quick before we end, but, you know, um, just as if you're in a toxic or bad relationship, like we all tend to have toxic
Mm. Traits.
traits, yeah, and things that we bring to the table, I know we live in a time and place where there's always, we like to think there's a good guy and a bad guy, but a lot of times, and I think more often than not, we're all a little bit of both, and one of the things that we had to do, like, coming out of the church plant and ministry and all of that, was facing a lot of our own um, toxic traits and,
Mm-hmm.
bad behaviors that we brought to the table. And, I think it would be, it's really important to face those things, don't, like, it's easy to blame, everyone else and to blame the church or the body, or the leadership that you came from and be like, it's all them. But um, even if it's like, that you have a hard time confronting people, or, a fear of authority and leadership, or I don't know, not wanting to rock the boat.
Yeah. Or you're just really skeptical and
Hmm.
really just don't trust.
Mhm.
a lot of leadership or a lot of people in power, which I get. I think I could tend to be that. I
Mhm.
really have to know people in order to trust them. I don't trust them implicitly just because they're in leadership. If anything, I distrust them because they're in leadership. That's
Yeah.
always my first instinct. So yes, yeah,
Yeah.
like you were saying.
Yeah, there's just I mean, there's so many things and we're all guilty of something, none of us are perfect and um, I mean, just even like if you go into therapy, like a lot of people think therapy is, oh, I'm going to go find out why these people are, losers and, hurt me all my life. And it's like a lot, like, unless you go in it with the uh, mindset of like, I need to change because I don't like what is happening over and over again in my life
Mhm,
and realize that you're part of the problem, um, therapy is useless because if it's only going to work if you
mhm,
change, change always starts with us. Revival always starts in our own hearts, and so if we want to see a change in the church and we want to see like these church hurt situations stop, like that starts with us,
mhm,
and facing our own sins, our own issues that we bring. And so anyway, I'd highly encourage you to deal with those things, to really, search deep, look deep inside and be like, what can I change about myself? And so when you do go into another church or some kind of home group type situation, like you're not bringing that baggage with
mhm,
you and just creating um another potential issue,
mhm.
for yourself or someone else down the road. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Unfortunately, we brought some of our issues and baggage in the church plant we're involved in. I think we
Hmm.
talked about that last episode as well. And, again, it was easy to blame the church and the leadership, but we had our own
Hmm.
issues, and we were to blame as well. We couldn't put 100% of the blame on them. So, yeah, look inward, ask the Lord to show you if you have any issues yourself, anything you're bringing that you shouldn't. Um, and I'm confident the Lord will show you that, and you know, um, you can deal with this. Sometimes you do need counseling
Hmm.
for sure, and therapy, and that can and will really help with those things as well. So don't be afraid of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it can be really helpful, and it can help you, down the line as well.
Yeah, we all have blind spots that,
Mm,
sometimes it's like we will never see them unless someone points them out to us,
yeah,
and someone on the
absolutely.
outside who doesn't like isn't super close to us or the situation, they
Mm,
they can usually pretty easily point them out, and that, yeah, like
yeah,
it's never a bad thing.
yeah,
So,
no, for sure. So
yeah,
yeah, guys. Well,
I think that's all.
I think that's it for now. I hope this. We hope this was a blessing to you guys
Hmm.
and you were ministered to. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can go to the comment section and let us know, or
Message us, email
direct
us.
message us, or something like that. We'd love to hear from you.
Hmm.
And like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Um, and thanks for watching.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
Yep. God bless.
Bye.
Bye.